Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One-to-One. Walk through almost any New York City neighborhood, and it seems as if there are more people sleeping in cardboard boxes and in sleeping bags these days. According to the Coalition for the Homeless, more than 63,000 men, women, and children used the city shelters last year, an all-time high. Why has the homeless population mushroomed? And in a city where property values and rents are so high and are steadily rising, can the homeless problem ever be solved? My guest today is Giselle Routhier, Policy Director at the Coalition for the Homeless. She says New York City needs to embrace bolder solutions to address this problem. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So just tell me, just very quickly, what the Coalition for the Homeless is and what you do.
Sure. The Coalition for the Homeless is actually the nation's oldest advocacy and direct services organization serving homeless men, women, and children in New York City. And we've been around for over 3 decades now. I'm the policy director, so I run our advocacy and public education, working to advance policies in New York City that are housing-based and that are going to help meaningfully reduce homelessness in New York City.
Is it a single nonprofit, or is it actually a coalition of nonprofits?
It's a single nonprofit.
Okay.
But our origins are, we're a coalition of people that sort of came together to develop the nonprofit.
Okay. The conversation about homelessness in New York has been going on for the more than 40 years that I've been living in the city. I remember in the 1980s, homelessness was very visible here. You saw people sleeping on the steps of churches. At night, there were bodies all over Grand Central and Penn Station, people sleeping there. There were camps of homeless people living in tunnels, under bridges. And then that sort of receded for a while. You didn't see that for a while, for a number of years. Now, however, one sees more homeless people on the streets. And all of the reports suggest that homelessness is at an all-time high. I quoted that 63,000 a night in the city shelters, which I think is the Coalition for the Homeless's number. Yep. And sometimes I hear 77,000 homeless people altogether. Are those numbers correct? And just what's the difference between the two?
Sure. So the 63,000 are the number of men, women, and children that sleep in New York City shelters every single night. So actually over the course of the year, it's over 100,000 because folks that move in and out of the shelter system. Right. So that nightly census figure is something that is specifically New York City. It's specifically the DHS shelter system, so it doesn't include some of the other more specialized shelter systems for folks who are victims of domestic violence or youth. And it doesn't count the number of folks that are sleeping on the streets, which is notoriously difficult to measure with any legitimate accuracy.
And it probably doesn't include, I mean, there are all kinds of churches and private organizations that
yes,
run shelters.
Correct.
It doesn't include those.
Correct.
The 77,000 number, what's that?
That I'm not sure
okay.
what that's referring to.
Okay, okay. But there are more people sleeping in the shelters than ever. I remember when the numbers were about 40,000, 50,000. So what's caused this uptick in the number of homeless in the city?
So it goes back a few years. The biggest increase that we've seen, and it really goes back to the Bloomberg years, there were 2 really critical policy decisions that were made under former Mayor Bloomberg that sort of started us on this trajectory to record homelessness. The first one is in 2005. At that point, homelessness and the number of folks in the shelter system was actually starting to turn a corner and go down. But at that time, he made the decision to cut off access to federal housing resources to homeless families. So that means Section 8, public housing, those critical resources that are federally funded and long-term affordable housing. So at that point he said, okay, we're not going to give these resources to homeless families anymore because we think it's drawing people into the shelter system. After that, the shelter census started to climb a little by little every year, and he instituted a series of short-term, time-limited, city-funded rental subsidies that what they essentially did was create a revolving door. So folks would leave for a brief period of time and come back in. At one point now, after everything is said and done, 60% of the people that left under those subsidies have returned to the shelter system. And in 2011, he even ended those subsidies. So at that point, that was sort of the second critical piece critical decision that was made. And at that point, there was virtually no way for homeless families to move out of the shelter system into stable, affordable, permanent housing. And the shelter census skyrocketed. And we're still seeing the effects of that today.
Okay. So basically, there were city subsidies, but they were only temporary.
Correct.
And if a person moved into an apartment building, got a subsidy, and then they found that after the subsidy ended, they couldn't afford the housing, and they wound up back in the shelter system. Right. And what he ended was the Section 8 vouchers and movement into the housing projects.
Yeah, public housing.
Okay.
Which are some of the most critical affordable housing resources that we have here in New York City, because they are long-term, because they have federal funding, and they allow people to stay in that housing on a permanent basis, right, and receive that subsidy ongoing.
Now, the Section 8 vouchers, they seem to come and go. Sometimes, you know, I guess depending on federal funding, sometimes there are more vouchers available than at other times. Is that the way it works? It just depends on. Yeah. Do you have any idea how many of those are available to New Yorkers now, or how much federal money is in vouchers? On
average, about 4,000 to 5,000 Section 8 vouchers turn over every year. So like within the pot that New York City has access to from federal funding, there will be 4,000 to 5,000 available vouchers every year for folks to be able to newly use.
Okay, but those are permanent.
Those are permanent.
Those are permanent. And they're also. And there are no longer the city subsidies that have those gone away altogether?
So now what happened under Mayor de Blasio is he's instituted a series of mostly city-funded rental subsidies that are longer term.
Right.
So some of them go for 5 years. Some of them are actually don't have time limits depending on the population that are eligible for them. And so that has actually helped, and critically, he's also reinstated the priority access for homeless families to access public housing and Section 8 vouchers. So now we have more tools in place to be able to help folks move out of shelter, but we're also facing a tighter housing market than we've ever faced before, and we're also facing landlord skepticism of any vouchers due to all of the kerfuffle that happened under Mayor Bloomberg, and again, the tightening housing market where landlords can say, I think I can, you know, I don't have to take this voucher. I could probably charge higher rent on the private market.
Right.
I'm not doing so. So we've got all of these things kind of combining, and that's sort of where we're at.
Section 8 vouchers have always been problematical. Do landlords, are they required to take Section 8 tenants, or can they decide whether they want to or not?
Legally, they are not required to discriminate based on source of someone's income. So whatever the rent is that they set, if someone comes in and has the ability to pay that with a voucher, they're not allowed to say, no, I'm not taking you because you have a voucher.
Okay.
In practice, that becomes very difficult to enforce,
right,
because landlords know a lot of clever ways to sort of get around that without explicitly saying that. And so that's where some of the new bolder solutions that we've been really focusing on come in, where we're talking about actual new construction of affordable housing that the city can be doing to actually create new housing stock subsidized for the long term, specifically for homeless households.
There seem to be two major issues fueling the housing, I'm going to call it a crisis. One is a lack of decent shelters, and another is a lack of permanent, affordable housing. Last year, the de Blasio administration launched what it's calling the Turning the Tide program. They announced that they were going to revamp the shelter system, build 90 new shelters. Have they built new shelters? I mean, how many city shelters are we looking at now? I saw one figure like about 360.
Yeah, even more than that. I think it's a little bit closer to 500. But if you think about the different types of shelters, that's sort of how we get at those higher numbers. So under this plan, we've had mixed reactions to this plan. So for a long time, as the shelter census has skyrocketed, the city has moved to using really poor models of shelter in order to meet the demand. So hotels, commercial hotels, what are called cluster sites, where the city is paying an exorbitant amount of monthly rent to temporarily house a homeless family in a private apartment to be used as shelter. And there are models of shelter that we know don't work and that are extremely expensive. And so this plan is meant to move away from that and start to revamp the shelter system in a way that's more effective, more responsive to families' needs. But what it lacks is the piece that's actually going to reduce the need for more shelters, which is an aggressive approach to creating affordable housing, particularly for folks that are in shelter.
Right.
And so that's really the main issue. The city has successfully opened some new shelters recently, and they have closed some of the more harmful cluster sites, but they're still in the process of making that happen in totality.
Right. Also under that plan, they were talking about building or preserving, and I'm always, worry about that preserving. I don't know what that means. 300,000 units of affordable housing by 2022, including 15,000 units of housing with support services for people with different kinds of issues. Has the administration actually built any new units of affordable housing?
So they have, but I'm glad you brought up the distinction between new and preservation, and the other important distinction is the level of affordability. So the mayor has made progress on his goals under his plan, but from our view, what the main problem is in terms of how he's proceeding with his plan is that units are being built and the affordability levels are still unaffordable to people at the lowest end of the income spectrum. So they're creating units that are dubbed affordable to people at maybe 80% of area median income, 100% of AMI. And those are folks that could probably find housing in the private market with little difficulty. But if we're talking about folks at 30% of AMI, 50% of AMI, and less, those are where our clients are, the people that we see on a daily basis, and they need housing more critically. And those are folks even who are not in the shelter system, who are precariously housed, who need that housing stock. And so what we've been continually pushing for is for under this historic plan, for the mayor to utilize the resources that are in place to help incentivize development of units that are affordable to people at 30% of area median income, and particularly for homeless households. And so we've put forward a plan to push the mayor to create 30,000 units of affordable housing specifically for people that are currently homeless, but we want 24,000 of those units to be new construction, because that preservation piece is key as well. Most of the preservation is critical, but what it does is preserve an affordable unit for someone who's currently living there.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to be available for someone to move in right away. Could be many, many years down the line before that unit's available. And so if we're going to reduce the homelessness crisis in New York City, we're going to need 10% of his plan to be specifically set aside units for homeless households, and the majority of those units, 24,000, to be new construction so that people can move out of shelters into those units immediately.
Okay. So basically, are you pushing for new housing for homeless people that is sort of like at the level that the housing, in terms of income, at the level where the housing projects are now, or even lower?
It would be about the same. So the way that public housing works is as long as you meet the income guidelines, you're paying 30% of your income in rent. And so that would be a similar scenario under new affordable housing created under this plan, is that if they set the income levels such that someone who is homeless is eligible for it, or set the criteria to be specifically for someone who's moving out of shelter, and that person then should pay 30% of whatever income they have towards that rent. And that's where the deeper subsidies come in, because in order to make the project viable and to continue to maintain the property going forward, there's going to have to be a deeper subsidy to match the gap between the low rent that family is paying and keeping the property up long term. So
is anybody creating that kind of housing? Has any been created? Is anybody talking about creating that kind of housing?
Yes, but not enough. So it's possible. And so we have tools in place that the de Blasio administration has instituted. So they have new term sheets, what are called the sort of guidelines that developers have to use if they want to access city funds to build. And those guidelines have created some new incentives to set aside units for homeless households. And that's good. But what we need from this mayor in particular is that goal the 30,000 with the 24,000 new. And we need developers to be utilizing those term sheets and even going beyond some of the recommendations there for homeless set-asides.
Because basically, my sense is the way that low-cost housing has been created in the city for, I don't know, last at least 20, 30 years, has been tax incentives to developers that requires them to set aside a certain amount of units in a regular building for low-income people. And is this what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But what's happening is that the units that are being set aside as affordable are going to folks that have incomes that are much higher than what you or I would consider to be an affordable unit.
Right.
And so we need to funnel subsidies to allow those units to be deeper subsidized, to allow families with lower incomes to move into those units. And that's something that the city can do, and they have the tools. As you said, they have this whole practice of development in place to incentivize developers. They need to be moving more in the direction of creating those units for the people who need it the most.
So why aren't they doing it?
I think that's a great question. I think we should ask the mayor that question, particularly now that we're facing record homelessness in New York City. And he's indicated a willingness to open new shelters and to move in the direction of improving the shelter system. He needs to be thinking about how we're going to actually meaningfully reduce homelessness. So as part of his Turning the Tide plan, they put out a goal of reducing the shelter census by 2,500 people over 5 years, not households, people. So that's even less households. And that's just completely inadequate from our view, given that there are 63,000 people in shelters every single night. So we need the political will. We need them to come together and work with the developers to really make sure that those the plan moves forward in an effective way to create units that are affordable to the folks who need it, particularly folks who are homeless. So it can happen. We need that political will.
We're going to take a short break. Then we'll be back with Giselle Routhier after this message. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy, and I'm talking with Giselle Routhier, Policy Director for the Coalition for the Homeless. You were talking about the need for the city to come up with the political will to subsidize more really affordable housing units for the really poor. Obviously, it's not just political will, it's money, right? Does the city get any help from the state from that? Is the state involved in that at all?
Not in the Mayor's Housing New York plan. And so a few things. I mean, the money actually, at this point, doesn't seem to be a problem, as the mayor has put in over $2 billion. He's very committed to this plan. They're ahead of schedule. He even revised his housing plan to move from 200,000 units originally to 300,000 units. So it seems like the money is not the issue here. And so that's where we're kind of saying, or thinking that it's got to be political will, right? Because we've got to move forward with policies that the mayor is committed to in order to create those units for homeless households.
Well, some would say that the city is sort of in a financial bind in that it has this legal requirement to provide shelter for anybody who needs it, hence shelter system. You know, you need it quickly, you got to find a place. And it spends a lot of money on the shelter system that some people say it should be spending on permanent housing. How does it get out from under that? I mean.
And it could be doing that. I think what's critical about this opportunity that we have now under Mayor de Blasio and his commitment that he's made towards affordable housing is that he's put all this money towards it. He's created this Housing New York plan. But if he shifted it such that it was actually tailored to where the need is the greatest, so that's homeless households, people at 30% of AMI, he could actually make a meaningful reduction in the shelter census and start to turn that curve. And then you'd start to be spending less and less on shelters, and you could reinvest that money in more affordable housing and start on a track where you're actually moving in the direction that we want to be moving in.
Right. If you say that the political will is not there, I mean, de Blasio has this plan, does that mean there's opposition from some sectors to it?
I think You know, there's a set of there's developers that are willing to work with the city to get those benefits that you mentioned before, the tax cuts, financial incentives to create housing. I think they're looking to the city for guidance on what they need to be doing in order to get those incentives. So that's critical. I think the other piece too is some community opposition to both to shelters, but also to new affordable housing in neighborhoods. And that's something that we need to sort of be better about explaining and understanding that if we're building affordable housing, that's going to actually reduce the need for shelters. You're not going to have as many community fights where we're opening new shelters if you can actually increase the housing supply for people who are homeless.
For years, there's been talk about building dormitory-style housing for people who have been homeless. Dormitory-style housing, I guess either small apartments or rooms with social supports in them. Is that something that you're advocating, or is there any movement forward on doing that?
I don't know how a dormitory-style housing would be different from shelter, but what maybe you're referring to is supportive housing, which we've been pushing for for many, many years, and that's usually targeted mostly towards single adults with severe mental illness or substance use issues. And that housing is really critical, and we've gotten both commitments from the mayor and the governor on that to move forward to create 30,000 units of supportive housing in New York City. That's critical. That needs to be moving forward at a much quicker pace than it currently is. They've set out a 15-year timeline for those units. We need to shrink that to 10 because we've got skyrocketing homelessness among single adults in particular. That's really it's really jarring to see how much the single adult shelter census has increased. There's been no abatement in that at all, where we have seen some abatement on the family side. And so we really need those supportive housing units to be coming on as quickly as possible to help folks that have the greatest need move into housing and then be able to stay there with the presence of supports that are critical.
In the meantime, the city's public housing projects, which house close to 400,000 low-income residents and about 176,000 apartments. For years, New York City's housing projects were among the best maintained in the country. You know, in Chicago and St. Louis, they were blowing them up. Things had gotten so bad, but we had some of the best. But they seem to be going to hell. Major repairs are not done. People are living with leaks. Non-working bathrooms, pests, lead contamination. The Housing Authority lied about conducting tests to determine lead contamination. It's failed to spend federal money for security cameras, money that it received, failed to keep tabs on warehouses that were full of all kinds of equipment that was just sitting there. How did it get to this point? And do you see any improvement in that situation under this administration?
I think we've gotten to this point with public housing, and then also in general, federal investment in affordable housing has been going down over many years and over decades, and we're disinvesting in affordable housing at the federal level right at a time where we need to not be doing that. And I think that's a critical piece of sort of where we are with public housing in New York. But there's also an understanding that if we're not going to be getting those funds from the federal government, the city and the state have to figure out ways to maintain this critical affordable housing resources because it houses hundreds of thousands of people in New York City. It provides a way for people to get back on their feet, to move out of homelessness if that's where they came from. And to be part of a community, and we need to make sure that that housing stock is maintained for the long term, because if we lose that, that's a huge blow to the availability of long-term affordable housing in New York City.
So has that been a problem of federal disinvestment, just not providing enough money, or mismanagement by the city, or both?
Probably a combination of both, but I mean, I think the federal disinvestment is really key there. I mean, that's not just over the past few years, that's been for decades. And NYCHA has had capital, has been in the red for capital repairs for a really long time, and that predates de Blasio. And so that's a really key piece, and they need to get out of that hole somehow. And so we need to think about creative solutions at the city and state level to do that, and then actually make sure that money is spent on the repairs that are needed, on maintaining that housing, and making sure that it's available for people who need it.
And didn't the state at one time provide money to the public housing system that I think Pataki cut that off some time ago, and so that we don't get as much money from the state?
Yeah, there's been some allocations at the state level over the past few years for NYCHA specifically, but it hasn't been enough. I mean, their deficits are, from what I recall, in the billions of dollars, and we've gotten, you know, a few $100 million here and there for those repairs. So we need a much bigger investment from both state and city. We've
got about 2 minutes left, but I want to ask you, what are your priorities? If you had to spell out 1, 2, 3, 4, the things you would like to see done that would be most beneficial in addressing this problem that we have, what would they be?
Short term, moving more homeless families immediately from shelter into the existing affordable housing that we have. So public housing and Section 8 vouchers, utilizing those to their maximum capacity to help homeless families move into the community. Medium and longer term, revising the Mayor's Housing New York plan to make sure that 30,000 units over the life of the plan are created specifically for homeless families to move out of shelter into those housing units. And 24,000 of these units have to be new construction in order to make a real dent in reducing the shelter census. And the third thing would be accelerating the timeline on supportive housing, because we're seeing really dramatic and tragic increase in the number of single adults who are homeless, particularly single adults who face extreme disabilities, extreme issues with mental illness and substance use issues, and they need affordable permanent housing, but they need those support services as well. So we need to accelerate that timeline and get those units open as quickly as possible.
Do you know of any other large cities that have done an admirable job of tackling the homelessness issue? Any place you'd point to that has done the right things?
I think what's challenging, what we're seeing kind of across the U.S. is that in a lot of the metropolitan areas, we're seeing increased urbanization, increased rental prices, tighter housing markets, and so a lot of cities are sort of struggling to figure out if they haven't dealt with homelessness on a large scale before, maybe they are now, and they're trying to sort of scramble to figure out what they're doing. A lot of cities are now looking to New York to say, well, what have you guys been doing, because you've been dealing with this for decades, and we need to be that beacon. We need to be at the place that other cities look to understand what works. And
obviously need to do better.
Yes.
Than we are doing.
Agreed.
It's, like I said, it's a thicket. Very complicated.
Yeah.
A lot of moving parts.
Agreed.
We're out of time. I want to thank Giselle Routhier for joining me today. For more information about the Coalition for the Homeless, you can visit their website, coalitionforthehomeless.org. For One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.